The dinner crowd had just started to roll into the small family restaurant when Evan Hartley pushed open the glass door and stepped inside. The soft jingle of the bell above him blended with the warm smell of baked bread and roasted chicken drifting out from the kitchen. Evan paused for a moment, taking in the space. It wasn't the kind of place most people expected a millionaire to walk into. It had creaky wooden floors, a chalkboard menu, and tables that didn't match perfectly, some round, some square, some older than others. But that was exactly why he liked spots like this. There was something honest about them, something real. He adjusted his glasses and gave a polite nod to the hostess, who greeted him with a smile. "Table for one?" she asked. He nodded. "Please." She guided him to a small table near the wall, close to a dusty upright piano that looked like it had been sitting untouched for years. Half its keys were yellowed, and there were faint scratches across the wood. Someone had once loved it. He could tell that much, but now it just stood in the corner like a forgotten memory. Evan set his coat on the back of the chair and glanced around. Families chatted softly. An older couple shared a plate of pasta. A group of teenagers laughed loudly near the windows. Everything felt naturally busy, the kind of weekend rush that promised decent food and friendly service. Then he noticed her. "Hey?" Young waitress rushed between tables with a pad tucked under her arm and a tray balanced on her hand. Her hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and a few loose strands fell across her face as she leaned to refill a glass of water. There was something about her movement, fast, focused, but gentle. She checked on each table with a tired but genuine smile, the kind people only have when they're determined to make a good impression, even if they're exhausted. Evan watched as she apologized softly to a customer for a small delay, then hurried toward the kitchen. Even from a distance, he could see how heavy her steps were, like she had been on her feet all day. When she turned around again, ready to help the next table, she must have spotted him, because she walked over with a warm, but slightly stressed expression. "Hi there. Welcome. What can I get you tonight?" she asked, pulling out her order pad. Her voice was gentle, steady, but it carried a tiny tremble, probably from fatigue. "Just some tea for now," Evan said. "And maybe a moment to look at the menu." "Of course," she replied with a nod, and she was off again. Evan noticed more little things as he waited. She checked on the older couple twice to make sure their food was warm enough. She helped the teenagers by bringing extra napkins without them even asking. She smiled at a child who dropped his spoon and replaced it before the mother could pick it up. She cared. It was obvious. When she returned with his tea, she set the cup down carefully. "Let me know if you need anything else." "Thank you," he said. Then his eyes drifted toward the piano again, and he pointed lightly toward it. "Does anyone ever play that?" The waitress followed his gaze and let out a small laugh, soft, like she didn't want anyone else to hear. "No, not really. It's been sitting there since before I started working here." He tilted his head. "Do you play?" She froze for half a second, the kind of pause people make when they're surprised by a question they don't expect. "Me? I used to. A long time ago." He smiled faintly. "Used to? Why stop?" The waitress shrugged with one shoulder, trying not to make it a big deal. "Life got busy. I guess that happens." She offered a polite smile and added, "If you're ready to order, I can take it now." Evan wasn't ready. Not because he needed more time with the menu, but because he suddenly felt curious in a way he hadn't in a long time. Something in her voice when she mentioned the piano sounded like a memory she tried to bury. "I'll order in a moment," he said quietly. "But tell me, if I asked you to play something, would you?" Her eyes widened slightly, and she blinked like she had misheard him. "Play? The piano?" "Now?" "Yes," he said, calm and casual, like he was asking for extra sugar in his tea. She let out a soft laugh, but it wasn't a happy one. It was the kind someone makes when they're caught off guard and don't know what to do. "Oh, I don't think I can. It's been years. And I'm working, so." She motioned to the tables around her. Evan nodded once, understanding. "Just one song," he said gently, not pushy at all. "On your break." "I'll wait." She looked at him carefully, trying to figure out if he was joking. "You're serious?" she asked, completely. She swallowed, her eyes drifting toward the piano again. There was something emotional behind that look, something deeper than simple hesitation. For a moment, she didn't speak. Her fingers curled slightly against her order pad, almost as if she were remembering how it felt to press piano keys. Then she shook her head. "I don't think I can," she said softly. "Really. I haven't performed in forever." He leaned back in his chair, keeping his tone easy. "I'm not asking for a performance. Just a song. No pressure." The waitress bit her lip. "You're really not going to drop this, are you?" "Not yet," he said with a small smile. She shook her head again and laughed lightly, but there was still nervousness in the sound. "It's not that simple." He set down his menu. "I'll make you a deal. If you play one song, I'll give you a very generous tip." The way he said it wasn't arrogant. It wasn't boastful. It was almost hopeful. But she didn't know that yet. Her reaction wasn't excitement. Instead, her shoulders tensed. He could tell she didn't want people to think she was doing it for money. "It's not about that," she said quickly. "I know," he replied softly. "It's just encouragement." The kitchen door swung open, and someone inside called her name. She glanced over her shoulder, then back at him, torn between responsibilities and a stranger's unexpected challenge. "I have to check on a few orders," she said quietly. "Please give me a minute. Take your time." When she walked away, Evan watched her carefully, not in a judging way, but with curiosity. She moved differently now, like his question had shaken something loose inside her, something she wasn't ready to face. A few minutes passed. Then 10. She kept working, but he could see her glancing over at the piano every now and then. The way someone stares at a door they aren't ready to open. Eventually, the restaurant slowed down just a little enough for her to catch her breath. She approached his table again with a refill of hot water for his tea. "Are you still waiting for me to play?" she asked, half smiling. "Yes." She let out another breath, the kind people release when they've run out of excuses. "It's really old," she said. "The piano. Half the keys probably stick. That's okay. And I'm rusty." "That's okay, too." She looked down at the floor, then at her hands. Her fingers brushed across her apron as though she were trying to comb them. "I used to play every day," she said quietly, her voice softer now. "Hours and hours. My mom loved listening. She said music made the house feel warm." Evan didn't interrupt, but when she got sick, I had to take extra jobs. And then I had to leave school, and, well, everything changed. I stopped playing because it hurt too much to remember what I gave up. Her voice trembled, but she steadied it. "So trust me. I'm not the person you think I am. I'm not some hidden talent waiting to be found. I'm just someone who used to be good at something a long time ago." Evan listened carefully, the softness in his expression deepening. "Maybe you're still good," he said gently. She shook her head. "I doubt it. Only one way to find out." She let out a slow exhale. "This is so embarrassing." "There's nothing embarrassing about rediscovering something you loved," he said. She inched her gaze back toward the piano again. "If I sound terrible, you're not allowed to laugh." "I won't," he promised. Another deep breath. Another glance around the room. "Okay," she whispered. "Just one song. On my break. But only because you're not going to let this go." Evan smiled gently. "I appreciate it." Her break came 20 minutes later. She walked toward the piano slowly, like it was a place she wasn't sure she belonged anymore. Her coworkers watched with raised eyebrows. A few regulars looked confused. The manager paused near the counter, unsure why one of his waitresses was heading toward the old instrument. She sat on the bench and ran her hand lightly across the keys. Dust lifted into the air. A memory flickered in her expression. Something soft. Something painful. Something cherished. Evan watched from his seat, silent. Respectful, the waitress placed her trembling fingers on the keys. Then she closed her eyes, and the room seemed to hold its breath the moment her fingers touched the keys. The waitress felt something she hadn't felt in years, a tiny spark, faint but familiar. It wasn't confidence, not yet. It was more like a memory waking up after a long sleep. The cool surface of the keys, the weight of them, even the slightly uneven feel of the old piano everything, pulled her back to the time when music was the biggest part of her life. But the spark quickly faded into nervousness. Her hands trembled. Her shoulders stiffened. She could almost hear her own heartbeat echoing louder than the chatter in the restaurant. She hadn't planned for this. She didn't ask for it. And she definitely wasn't prepared to play in front of strangers. A few customers had noticed something unusual happening and looked her way with mild curiosity. But most people were still absorbed in their meals and conversations. No one expected anything special from her. She was just the waitress who brought them drinks and refilled their breadbasket. She wished it could stay that way. Evan watched from his table, careful not to stare too intently. He knew pressure could ruin a moment like this. His goal wasn't to embarrass her, only to give her a tiny push toward something she clearly missed. The waitress took a shaky breath and pressed one key. Just one. The note came out slightly sharp, the piano showing its age. She winced. Her hand froze. This was a mistake, she told herself. She should have said no. She should have walked away. Why had she agreed to this? Her throat tightened as she stared at her own hands. They looked different than she remembered, more tired, a little shaky. Not the hands of someone who used to play for hours without stopping. The old version of herself felt distant, like someone she used to know but could no longer reach. She pressed another key, a softer one this time. Then another. Each sound felt like she was testing the water, trying to see if she still belonged in this world she'd left behind. Her break wasn't long. Just a few minutes. If she didn't start now, she'd lose her chance, and maybe the courage to ever try again. The waitress inhaled deeply and let her fingers settle on the starting notes of a simple piece she used to play when she was younger. It wasn't grand or difficult. It didn't require a dramatic opening. It was just a gentle melody, one her mother used to hum when cleaning the house. She played the first few notes slowly. They came out uneven. Her fingers stumbled. She closed her eyes, embarrassed. She knew she was rusty, but she didn't realize it would feel this awkward. But instead of pulling her hands back, she tried again. First note. Second note. Third. The piano responded with a warm sound, this time not perfect, but kinder than before. Her breathing steadied. She played the next line of the melody. Her fingers, though shaky, remembered the pattern. The notes flowed. A little easier, like a river that had been blocked for years and was finally finding a path again. A small sound escaped her, almost like a soft sigh. The music felt familiar again. Not something she had mastered, but something she had loved. Someone nearby paused mid-conversation and turned to look at her. Then someone else. The restaurant wasn't silent yet, but the energy started to shift. People sensed something happening, not loud or showy, just gentle and unexpected. The waitress tried not to pay attention. If she thought too much about the people watching, she would fall apart. Instead, she imagined she was alone at home, sitting, at her old keyboard with the window open and her mother humming in the kitchen. That memory steadied her. Her hands moved with more confidence. She brought out the melody with more emotion, letting it swell softly through the room. The piano wasn't in great shape, but she played around its weaknesses, adjusting her speed, adjusting her pressure, adapting the way musicians learn to adapt without thinking. Evan felt his chest warm as he watched her. He didn't smile widely. He didn't want to make her self-conscious, but the corner of his mouth lifted slightly as he saw the transformation. The nervous young woman who sat down a few minutes ago was slowly disappearing. In her place was someone who still had music inside her, even if she had tried to bury it. The waitress didn't notice her coworkers gathering near the kitchen door, watching her with raised eyebrows and quiet fascination. She didn't notice the older couple smiling softly in her direction, their forks paused midway to their mouths. She didn't notice the manager leaning on the counter, stunned that the old piano was producing something this calm and beautiful. All she noticed was the music. For the first time in a long time, she felt calm, not because life had gotten easier, but because for a moment she wasn't thinking about bills or schedules or double shifts. She disappeared into the melody, letting each note guide her to the next, but she couldn't hide from the world forever. Her fingers slipped dot just slightly, just enough for the wrong note to jump out sharply dot. Her eyes flew open. The spell broke. Her hands froze above the keys, stiffening again. She glanced around for the first time and realized that nearly half the room was watching her. The customers at the front table were turned in their seats. A family near the window had stopped eating. Even the teenagers had lowered their voices and looked over. Her chest tightened. This was why she stopped performing. Not because she didn't love music, but because she hated being seen when she wasn't perfect. Her breath hitched slightly, and her gaze flicked toward Avon. She expected disappointment or judgment, or some sign that she had let him down. But all she saw was calm encouragement. He didn't move or speak. He simply nodded once, slowly, as if saying, "It's okay. Keep going." The waitress swallowed hard and turned back to the piano. She felt exposed, like all her emotions were sitting on the surface where anyone could see them. But there was something grounding about the simple nod he gave. Not pushy, not demanding, just supportive. She pressed the next note dot, then another. Bit by bit, she regained the rhythm. Not as confidently as before, but enough to keep moving. The melody softened again, gentler this time, almost like she was whispering through the piano dot. Someone in the room sighed, a warm, appreciative sound. She didn't look to see who dot. The piece wasn't long, just a few minutes. But by the time she reached the final notes, the room had grown noticeably quieter. The usual clatter of dishes, the loud conversations, the laughter, it had all softened. When the last note faded, she didn't lift her hands immediately. She stayed still, breathing quietly, unsure what to do. Then a few people clapped. Not loudly at first, just a soft ripple of appreciation. The waitress stiffened in surprise, her face flushing deeply. She stood so quickly, the bench creaked beneath her. "Oh, thank you," she whispered awkwardly, bowing her head a little. The clapping grew slightly stronger, but still gentle, warm, respectful. No one mocked her. No one laughed. No one made her feel small. Evan didn't clap loudly. He didn't want to draw attention to himself. But he did join in softly, his eyes full of quiet admiration. The waitress stepped away from the piano, her legs feeling unsteady. When she reached Evan's table, she covered her face with one hand, embarrassed. "I can't believe I just did that," she muttered. "You did well," he said simply. "I messed up twice. Everyone messes up." She let out a shaky laugh. "I used to play so much better. And you probably will again, if you keep practicing." Her expression softened. "You really think so?" "Yes. he said. "You haven't lost it. You just hid it for a while." She looked down, touched by the words in a way she didn't expect. "Thank you for pushing me," she said. "I didn't know I needed that." "You're welcome." Before she could say more, her manager called out from across the room, reminding her gently that her break was over. She nodded and turned back to Evan. "I should get back to work." "But thank you, really." He nodded. "Anytime?" As she walked away, the restaurant slowly returned to its usual rhythm. But the energy was different, now lighter, warmer. People kept glancing at the piano, as if expecting it to come alive again. The waitress grabbed a tray from the counter, her hands still trembling slightly. Not from fear anymore, but from something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. And somewhere inside her, a quiet realization began to grow. She wasn't as lost as she thought. She wasn't done with music. Not yet. The rest of the evening moved forward, but the feeling in the restaurant never fully returned to what it had been before. People still talked and ate and laughed, but there was a softer energy in the air, a kind of quiet appreciation that lingered like a warm glow. Even customers who hadn't paid attention to the piano moment sensed something had happened. It felt as if the place itself was breathing a little deeper. The waitress tried to slip back into her usual rhythm, but nothing felt quite the same. Her steps felt lighter, her hands steadier, her heart a little fuller. She kept replaying the moment in her mind, not just the music, but the way it felt to let it out again. A small applause afterward, the quiet nod from Evan, the encouragement, the freedom. She hadn't expected any of that. As she delivered plates of food and collected empty glasses, she caught customers smiling at her in a way she wasn't used to. Not in a strange way, but in a warm, respectful way. A mother with her young son even stopped her. "You play beautifully," the woman whispered. The waitress blushed instantly. "Thank you. I was really nervous." "You couldn't tell," the woman said with a gentle smile. That was the moment the waitress realized something important. She hadn't fallen apart. She hadn't frozen. She hadn't run away. She did it. She actually did it. Still, she wasn't entirely comfortable with the attention. She preferred to keep her head down as she worked, letting the busier tables distract her. But no matter how many orders she took or plates she carried, part of her mind drifted back toward the piano. It was strange. For years, she had avoided even looking at one. Now she couldn't stop thinking about it. When she passed Evan's table, again, he had finished his meal and was sipping the last of his tea. He looked calm, observant, the way someone looks when they're thinking more than they're speaking. She wondered for a moment who he really was. He didn't talk much about himself. He didn't brag. He didn't hint at anything grand. But there was something different about him, something easy to trust. She approached his table to clear the empty dishes. "Thank you again," she said softly, stacking the plates carefully. "You're welcome," he replied. She hesitated before asking, "What made you even ask me to play?" He thought for a moment. "You looked like someone who had a story behind her eyes." She blinked, surprised by the honesty. "A story?" He nodded. "Some people walk through life carrying something heavy. Others carry something waiting to be shared. You looked like the second kind." Her cheeks warmed. "I didn't think anyone noticed." "Most don't," he said simply. "But I did." The words touched her more than she expected. She had spent years trying to stay invisible, not because she wanted to be, but because life had pushed her into corners where her dreams stopped mattering. She didn't know what to say. So she offered a small smile and carried the dishes back to the kitchen. But the conversation stayed with her. The night grew busier again as the dinner rush hit full force. The waitress worked fast, weaving through tables with practiced ease. But her mind kept circling around the piano performance, like a quiet orbit she couldn't escape. At one point, while refilling a glass of water, she overheard two customers whispering. "Did you hear her play earlier?" One asked. Yes. I didn't know she could do that. She should play here more often. The waitress nearly spilled the water. She quickly stepped away, her face burning with embarrassment. She wasn't used to being talked about, especially not in a positive way. Near the end of the evening, the crowd began to thin. Families left with full bags of leftovers. Couples finished their desserts. The teenagers paid and rushed out laughing into the cool night air. Slowly, chairs were pushed in, tables were wiped clean, and the sounds of the kitchen quieted down. Evan was still there, not in a lingering, awkward way, just calmly finishing his tea, taking his time as if he had no reason to rush anywhere. It was unusual for a customer to stay so long, but he didn't seem like he was avoiding anything. He seemed thoughtful. When the waitress passed by with a cloth in her hand, he spoke quietly. You know, he said, the piano didn't sound as old as it looked. She smiled softly. I think it's trying its best. It responded to you, he said. That's how you can tell someone is a real musician. She froze for a moment, taken aback. The word musician no longer applied to her, at least not in her own mind. I don't think I qualify anymore, she said with a nervous laugh. Why not? He asked. I'm out of practice. Really out of practice, but not out of talent, he admitted. His calm certainty made her throat tighten unexpectedly. People in her life rarely believed in her, not because they didn't care, but because they didn't understand what music meant to her. Her mother had understood, but after she passed, everything changed. The waitress tried to push the thought away before sadness could settle in. You say that, she said. But I messed up earlier. Everyone makes mistakes, he replied. The melody didn't stop. That's what matters. Something in her chest softened. Before she could respond, her manager called from across the restaurant. Close-up begins in 10 minutes. She nodded and turned back to Evan. Thank you again for tonight. It meant more than you know. I'm glad, he said simply. As she walked away, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. But instead of leaving cash immediately, he paused, thinking deeply about something. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, her coworkers gathered around her while she cleaned a stack of menus. You didn't tell us you could play like that, one of them said, almost offended. I didn't think it mattered, she replied shyly. Mattered? Another coworker said. You made the whole place stop talking. That never happens here. She laughed, feeling shy. It wasn't that good. Stop. It was amazing. The compliments made her uncomfortable, but also warm. She didn't know how to handle praise anymore. It had been so long since anyone admired something she did. When the restaurant finally closed for the night, she tied her apron and gathered her things from the small employee closet. As she stepped out into the dining area, she saw that Evan had finally stood up. His coat was draped over his arm, and he looked ready to leave. She approached him one last time. Thank you for being patient with me, she said. And thank you for pushing me to try. He nodded and placed a folded bill under his empty teacup. You have a gift, he said. Don't let it stay silent again. She swallowed, touched. I'll try. I hope you do, he said. She watched as he walked toward the door. But before he left, he paused with his hand on the handle. By the way, he said, turning back to her, don't doubt yourself as much as you do. It steals things from you. Her breath caught. She had never heard anyone put it like that. He gave a small nod and stepped out into the night. She stood there for a moment, trying to steady her emotions. When she finally reached the table to collect the bill, she lifted the teacup and froze. He hadn't left a generous tip. He had left an unbelievable one, far more than she had expected or even thought possible. Her breath hitched as she stared at the number. It was enough to pay a month of rent, enough to clear one of her overdue bills. Enough to give her space to breathe. But the money wasn't what made her eyes well up. It was the small note he left beside it. For the music you almost lost. Don't let it go again. Her hand trembled as she picked up the note. She pressed it against her chest for a moment, letting the warmth of the message sink into her. That night, when she walked home, the cool air wrapped around her like a soft blanket. The streetlights cast long shadows on the pavement, and the world felt strangely quiet in a peaceful way. Not a lonely one. Every step she took felt different. Lighter. Hopeful. As she crossed the small bridge near her apartment. She paused and looked out at the slow-moving river below. The moonlight shimmered across the surface, breaking into small ripples that drifted downstream. She thought about the piano. She thought about the applause. She thought about the note. She thought about Evan. She thought about the version of herself she used to be, the girl who practiced for hours, who dreamed of stages and grand halls, who believed she had something to offer the world. That girl wasn't gone. She was still inside her. Waiting. Listening. That night, for the first time in years, the waitress unlocked her apartment door, turned on her old keyboard, and sat down. Her hands hovered above the keys, trembling. Then she began to play. Quietly. Gently. But with more heart than she had in a long time. The moment Lily sat at the piano, the entire room seemed to lean toward her, as if everyone quietly sensed that something unusual was about to happen. Evan watched from his seat near the back, his hands resting lightly on the table, his expression calm but focused. He had expected something nice, maybe a simple tune played shyly. But he never imagined that Lily would bring the room to a standstill the very moment her fingers touched the keys. At first, Lily felt the familiar panic rising inside her. It had been so long since she had played in front of anyone. Her hands felt stiff, almost foreign, as though they didn't belong to her. She closed her eyes for a quick second, took in a breath that felt too shallow, and reminded herself that it was only one song, nothing more. No pressure, no judgment, just her and the piano. The first notes came out soft and careful, as if she was testing the keys. But within seconds, the melody began to grow fuller, clearer, and more sure. It was a gentle song, one she used to play at home when life was simpler and less heavy. She had learned it as a child, and it had stayed with her through every difficult moment she had faced. It was the one piece she could always rely on to make her feel like herself again. People in the restaurant began turning their heads one by one. A couple near the window stopped talking mid-sentence. A family who had been arguing quietly fell silent. Even the cook peeked from the kitchen doorway, wiping his hands on his apron as if afraid to make a sound. Something about Lily's playing drew people in. Maybe it was the softness of the tune, or the way she leaned into the keys, like she had known them all her life. Or maybe it was the emotion that slipped into each note. Whatever it was, the room started to shift. The loud chatter faded, replaced by the calm flow of the music. Evan sat a little straighter. He felt something stir inside him, something he had not expected at all. He had heard talented musicians in his life, concert players, performers, people who had trained for years in the finest schools, but this felt different. This felt real. It felt personal, almost like Lily was telling a story without saying a single word. As the song continued, Lily forgot where she was. She forgot the people watching her, the pressure she had felt, the weight of her worries. All she focused on was the music. The keys responded to her touch exactly how she hoped they would. They felt warm and familiar, welcoming her back as if she had never left. The melody grew bolder. Her hands moved faster, her posture changed, and her confidence returned bit by bit. The fear that had been gripping her finally let go. She allowed herself to enjoy the moment, A soft breeze slipped through the door when someone walked in, but even that didn't break the quiet spell in the room. The newcomer paused just inside the entrance, confused by the silence until they heard the music. Then they, too, simply stood and listened. Lily's coworkers stood behind the counter, all of them frozen in place. They had known she could play, or at least they had heard rumors, but none of them had ever witnessed it. The way she played now felt like discovering a new person entirely, someone stronger, someone braver, someone who didn't fit the tired, overworked image they saw every day. As Lily approached the middle part of the song, something in the room shifted even more. The notes became richer and more emotional. She slowed for a brief moment, letting a few soft notes hang in the air. Then she pressed forward into a section filled with gentle rises and falls, like waves moving across the ocean. Her hands flowed effortlessly. Her heart beat fast, not with fear now, but with excitement. She could feel the music in her fingertips, in her chest, in the way she breathed. It was the first time in years she felt like herself, like the person she once dreamed she could become. A woman seated near the middle wiped tears from her eyes. A man at the counter rested his elbows down slowly, afraid that any small movement might disrupt the moment. For the first time since the restaurant opened that day, there was complete peace. Even the small sounds, the clink of forks, the shuffle of chairs, had faded away. The restaurant felt almost like a concert hall, though it was small and filled with mismatched tables and chairs. Yet in that moment, the room held a kind of quiet respect. Evan continued to watch Lily with complete attention. He wasn't just impressed, he was moved. He could see the emotion pouring out of her, the vulnerability, the strength. It was as if she wasn't just playing a song. She was opening a door to everything she had kept inside for too long. When the melody reached a gentle high point, her fingers grazed the keys with a feather-light touch. The sound was tender, almost fragile. Some listeners held their breath, afraid that even breathing too loudly might break the magic. Lily felt a warmth spread through her chest. It was the familiar feeling she used to get when she performed as a child, the feeling that made her want to keep playing, no matter how difficult things became. It was the feeling that made her love music in the first place. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the music guide her. And when she opened them again, she saw something she never expected, the whole room watching her, not with boredom or impatience, but with quiet admiration. Her fingers moved into the final section of the piece, the part she always loved the most. It was soft but full of emotion, ending the song with a sense of calm. Each note gently settled into the room, as if it was taking its place in the air, leaving traces of warmth behind. As she played the last few notes, her heart pounded again. She wasn't scared, but she was overwhelmed. She knew the song was ending, and a part of her didn't want it to stop. For those few minutes, she had stepped out of her real life and back into a world she loved deeply. The final note lingered softly, fading into silence. Lily lifted her hands from the keys. For a moment, she stayed frozen, almost afraid to turn around and face everyone. She expected polite applause, or maybe a simple nod of approval, something small and quiet. What she heard instead stunned her. The entire room erupted into loud, heartfelt applause. It wasn't scattered. It wasn't polite. It was full and warm, as if every person there had been waiting for the chance to cheer. Some people stood up. Others clapped with wide smiles on their faces. A few even whistled softly, though they tried to keep it from sounding too loud in the peaceful atmosphere. Lily blinked in surprise, her cheeks turning a deep shade of red. Her coworkers cheered from behind the counter, clapping harder than anyone else. The cook leaned forward with a grin, shaking his head as if he couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. Evan stood slowly from his seat, not clapping right away. He simply watched her with a thoughtful, almost emotional expression. He looked like someone who had just found something he didn't know he had been looking for. When he finally joined the applause, it was with a soft, sincere smile. Lily swallowed hard. She didn't know what to say. She had never been good with attention, and getting this much at once felt overwhelming. But at the same time, she felt lighter than she had in years. She stood from the piano bench, brushing her hands nervously along the sides of her apron, and gave a shy, grateful nod to the room for the first time in a long while. She felt seen not as a tired waitress trying to get through her shift, but as a person with a gift she had forgotten she carried. What she didn't know yet was that this night would change far more than just the mood of the restaurant. It would change her future. Dot and Evan, watching her carefully from across the room, already knew it. Lily stood near the piano, still trying to understand what had just happened. Her heart was beating fast, not from fear anymore, but from the shock of how people reacted. She had never expected anyone to care so deeply about her music. She felt almost weightless, as if the applause had lifted her off the ground. Slowly, the restaurant returned to normal sounds, though the energy in the room stayed warm and bright. People kept talking about the performance, sharing comments with the people at their tables. Some even looked over at Lily, as if she were someone special. She tried to smile back, but her face was still red, and her hands were shaking a little. She walked back toward the counter, where her coworkers rushed to her with excitement. "I had no idea you could play like that," one of them said, nearly bouncing with energy. "Lily, that was incredible." Another added, "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Lily laughed nervously. "It's been a long time. I didn't think I was still any good." But just as she said it, she noticed Evan walking toward her. She had almost forgotten he was there. He moved slowly, the way someone walks when they're deep in thought. His expression was calm, but there was something bright in his eyes, something she didn't understand yet. When he reached the counter, he didn't speak right away. He simply stood there for a moment, almost as if he was choosing the right words. Lily felt her stomach twist with nervousness. "That was something truly special," he finally said. His voice was steady and sincere. "I knew you had some musical talent when you agreed to play, but I didn't expect that. That wasn't just good, Lily. It was powerful. You have a gift, and you shouldn't hide it." Lily didn't know how to answer. She lowered her eyes, feeling shy, but also strangely proud. "Thank you," she said quietly. "It means a lot, really." Evan nodded, as if confirming something in his mind. He rested his hands on the counter gently. "Can we talk for a moment?" he asked. Lily's breath caught for a second. "Sure." He stepped aside so they could speak without being surrounded by her curious coworkers. Even though the restaurant was still busy, the corner they moved to felt quiet. Evan took a breath before speaking. "I want to be honest with you. I'm not just someone who travels around for fun. I've spent years helping young musicians and artists achieve their goals. I fund programs, scholarships, and training for people who deserve a chance to follow their dreams. It's something I care deeply about." Lily frowned softly, not in confusion, but in disbelief. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. He smiled gently. "Because I think you should be one of those people." She blinked slowly, unsure she had heard him correctly. "Me?" "Yes," he said. "You have real talent. And talent like yours shouldn't be kept in a small corner of the world. It should be nurtured. It should grow. And I want to help you do that." Her breath grew shallow, and her hands began to tremble again, but not from fear. This time, it was from the shock of possibilities she never expected to face. "I don't understand," she said softly. "Help me how?" Evan didn't hesitate. "I want to sponsor your return to music school. I'll cover your tuition, your housing, and any living expenses you need while studying. Completely. You won't have to worry about anything but your music." Lily stared at him, unable to speak. His words felt unreal, like something out of a dream. She couldn't remember the last time someone believed in her enough to offer her a chance like this. "Why would you do that?" Her voice cracked slightly. Evan gave a small smile. "Because sometimes, when you meet someone with a gift, you know right away that they deserve a chance at something better. And because you remind me of someone who once needed help too." He paused for a moment, then added softly, "No one helped them in time. I don't want that to happen again." Lily's throat tightened. She felt a wave of emotions she didn't quite know how to name. Gratitude, hope, fear, excitement, all mixing at once. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything right now," Evan replied. "Think about it. Talk to your family if you need to. But please, don't let this opportunity slip away because you're scared." She nodded slowly, still overwhelmed. I will think about it. I promise." Evan reached into his pocket and handed her a simple business card. "Call me when you're ready. No pressure. Whatever decision you make will be the right one for you." Lily took the card carefully, as if it were fragile. She stared at the crisp letters printed on it. It felt like she was holding the start of a new life in her hands. Their conversation ended when a group of customers waved her over for help. She excused herself, and Evan stepped back, returning to his seat. He stayed quiet, allowing her the space to process everything. As Lily returned to work, she tried to focus on taking orders and delivering meals, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. Every sound in the restaurant felt muted. Every step felt strange, as if she were walking through a dream. Her coworkers kept asking what Evan had said, but she only smiled shyly and told them she would explain later. During a small break, she went outside and stood near the alley beside the restaurant. The cool evening air touched her skin, helping her breathe easier. She looked down at the business card. Again, it was simple, clean, professional, and it felt like hope. She thought about her past, the years she had dreamed of becoming a musician, the moments she had played in competitions, the nights she stayed up practicing until her hands hurt. She remembered how everything changed when her mother fell sick, how she had dropped everything to help at home and work wherever she could. She hadn't regretted it, but it had been painful to let go of something she loved so deeply. Now, after so many years, someone was offering her a path back. Her heart ached with longing. But she was scared, too. What if she wasn't good enough anymore? What if she failed? She leaned her back against the wall, closed her eyes, and let the cool air calm her. Inside, she could still hear the faint echoes of applause. Maybe she wasn't as lost as she thought. When she went back in, Evan was preparing to leave. He gave her a warm smile and a small nod before walking toward the door. "Think about it," he said gently, "and take your time." "I will," she replied. He stepped outside, and the door closed behind him. Lily stood there for a long moment, the business card held tightly in her hand. She didn't know what her future would look like yet, but for the first time in years, she felt like she had a choice. She felt like her dreams were no longer impossible, and deep inside her heart, a quiet voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something beautiful. Lily lay awake that night long after her shift ended, staring at the ceiling of her small bedroom. The apartment around her was quiet, but her thoughts were loud and restless. Evan's offer kept replaying in her mind, each detail circling like a gentle storm. His words, the promise of school, the chance to return to the life she once dreamed of. She held his business card in her hand, the edges worn from her touch. It felt unreal, almost like a story someone tells about someone else. But this time, it was her life, her chance. The sun hadn't even risen when she got out of bed. She made herself a cup of tea and sat by the small window that overlooked the street. The world outside was quiet and still. She liked moments like this, moments where life felt simple enough for her to breathe. But today wasn't simple. Today she had to think about her future. She thought about her mother, who always encouraged her to play, even when money was tight. She thought about the years she spent practicing, building her skills, dreaming of stages she never got to stand on. She also thought about how she gave it all up without hesitation when life demanded more from her. She didn't regret helping her family, but she had always wondered what might have happened if things had been different. Now, for the first time in years, she had the chance to find out. By the time morning light touched the streets, she had made her decision. She didn't know where it would lead or how difficult it might be, but she knew she didn't want to spend the rest of her life wondering, what if? She picked up her phone, stared at Evan's number for a long moment, and finally pressed the call button. He answered on the second ring. Lily? Hearing him say her name made everything feel real. Hi, she said, her voice soft but steady. I thought about what you said, and I want to try. I want to go back to music. There was a long, warm pause on his end, a pause that felt like a smile. I'm glad, he said. You're making a good choice. I'll help you get everything started. And just like that, a new chapter began. The following weeks moved quickly. Evan connected her with the admissions office of a well-known conservatory. They arranged for her to visit the campus, meet the teachers, and take placement evaluations. When she first walked onto the campus, her breath caught in her throat. The buildings were beautiful, filled with life and music. Students practiced in hallways, their notes drifting through the air like tiny stories. Lily felt small but also excited, like she belonged to something bigger than herself. She took her placement test with trembling hands, uncertain if she still had the skill she once did. But when she finished, the instructor looked at her with quiet amazement. You haven't studied in how many years? A long time, she said shyly. You play like someone who never stopped. The compliment carried her through the rest of the day like a gentle wind. Evan joined her for a meeting with the dean later that afternoon. They discussed schedules, financial details, and everything Lily needed to start fresh. Every step felt surreal. When she finally signed the last form, she stared at her name on the page with disbelief. She was officially student again. Evan congratulated her with a calm smile. This is the beginning, he said. Lily felt her eyes warm with tears, happy ones. It's all because of you. He shook his head. It's because of your talent and your decision to try again. I only opened a door. You walked through it. The first weeks of school were challenging. Lily struggled to adjust to new schedules, new teachers, and long practice hours. Her hands grew sore, her back ached, and sometimes she wondered if she had made a mistake. But then she would sit at the piano, close her eyes, and let the familiar feeling rush through her. The music reminded her why she came back. Each day she grew stronger, faster, more confident. Her teachers praised her discipline. Her classmates admired her skill. Some even asked her to join small groups for performances and recitals. Slowly, she began to feel like she belonged. She still worked part-time at the restaurant on weekends. Not because she needed the money anymore, but because the place felt like home. Her coworkers celebrated her achievements and proudly told customers about her. Journey. Her mother cried happy tears when Lily told her the news over the phone. I always knew you'd find your way back to music, she said. You were born for it. Those words stayed with Lily every day. Months passed. Lily's life transformed in ways she had never imagined. She practiced daily, performed in small concerts, and learned new styles she had never explored before. She grew not just as a musician, but as a person. And Evan? He didn't hover or interfere. He checked in once in a while, always respectful of her independence. Sometimes he attended her recitals, sitting quietly in the back of the room with a soft, encouraging smile. Lily appreciated that about him. He wasn't helping her for attention or praise. He simply cared. One evening, after a small performance at the school, Lily spotted him waiting near the exit. She hurried over, excited. "What did you think?" she asked. "I thought you played beautifully," he said. She smiled. "I'm getting better every day." "I can hear it," he replied. "You look happier too." "I am," she said softly. "I really am." They walked together toward the parking lot. The sky was dark, but the campus lights glowed warmly, giving everything a peaceful feeling. "You know," she said, "sometimes I still think about that night at the restaurant. If you hadn't asked me to play, none of this would have happened." Evan glanced at her. "I didn't create your talent, Lily. I just noticed it. You were always meant for something more." She looked down shyly. "It still changed my life." He smiled gently. "And now you're changing your own life every day. I'm proud of you." Her heart warmed at his words. As the school year ended, Lily was chosen to perform in one of the larger recitals, an event attended by music professionals, teachers, and families. It was the biggest stage she had stood on in years. Before stepping out, she closed her eyes and took a long breath. She thought about her journey, the restaurant, the dusty piano, Evan's offer, the long nights of practice, the fears she fought, and the hope she found. When she sat at the piano, she felt no fear, only gratitude. The first note she played was soft, gentle, full of emotion. From that moment, the audience leaned in, drawn into her music, the same way the restaurant once had. Every rise and fall of the melody carried a piece of her story. Every note spoke for the dreams she once buried, then bravely brought back to life. When the final note faded, the room erupted into applause, loud, heartfelt, full of admiration. Lily looked into the audience and found Evan standing, clapping with the same proud expression he wore the night he first heard her play. She felt tears gather in her eyes, not of sadness, but of overwhelming joy. She bowed deeply, her heart full. This time, she wasn't just a waitress with forgotten dreams. She was a musician again, and she was just getting started. The story of the night that changed her. Life became something she remembered with gratitude, not disbelief. Because that night didn't just give her a moment of applause, it gave her a future. Future she would honor with every note she played. And as she walked off the stage, the cheers still echoing behind her, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had finally found her way back to the life she was meant to live.